I'm just running in from outside from a walk. We get our Friday afternoons off, so I have a phone date a walking phone date with, or I try to make a walking phone date with a friend. So
Why? Why do you have? Is that a new thing to have Fridays off? Or
it's Fridays after 2, and basically it was put in place just because of like low morale, and people are just tired out after a year, and so the management asked people for what their suggestion was, and people said, let us off early every Friday. Like, it's just such a treat to look forward to every Friday afternoon. And so they did. So the office officially closes at 2 on Friday. And for many of us, we've probably already worked 40 hours by 2 o'clock on Friday, right? So, because you're already working long hours. And then they've made a benefit, for people who have more standard 8-hour days. They've made kind of like a sick leave benefit. I think it's a leave benefit where you just, take those 3 hours as leave that doesn't count against I don't know how they account for it, but it doesn't account for, against your leave time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been nice. So for me, I just try to structure in a phone call with a friend every Friday that I, just kind of going through my phone book, catching up with people.
Good for you. I'm curious if they've done any kind of tallying of how the morale has changed, or if has anybody given feedback on.
Well, they do. Yeah, we have I can't remember if it's an annual or every other year kind of morale survey, all staff survey, where we actually have somebody come in and does it, and benchmarking against other organizations, and looking at turnover rate. Like, so we get those kinds of reports. And this year, I think they did an off-cycle one because morale was like they were just hearing the morale wasn't good. So yeah, I almost feel like I have too much information on that sometimes, because it's like, is it really that shitty around here? And then when you're a manager, you're always then you have to have a plan. What are you doing? And my team is much smaller than many teams, so I don't have to worry about as many people. And 2, we tend to have we pride ourselves on being like a team that's like the happy team, motivated, support one another, all those things. So,
actually take care of ourselves.
Yeah, take care of ourselves, one another, encourage, kind of, I don't know. My thing is work with people. If what people need is flexibility and more work-life balance, then work with them to make that happen. And if what they want is professional development opportunities, or whatever they want to do in their flex time, just help them do that already.
Don't try to fit them into the mold, but try to make
them work. Try to just figure out what everybody's, what their goals are. So I'm lucky too, because I've got one guy on my staff who's really into kind of the Myers-Briggs type of stuff. He uses different methodologies, but he's always getting people to do that stuff. And then you talk about how you work together as a team. So I think actually some of teamwork, I'm not so wired that way to talk about that stuff all the time, but I have to admit, I find it helpful for our team to, it's almost like being in team therapy or something, where you're talking to each other and kind of putting out there, I'm this kind of person, this is what makes me tick, or this is
how I work best. And
yeah. So
well, I think that's one of those processes that's very helpful, or can be very helpful, as long as people aren't completely resistant or just so out to lunch that it's no, this is the way we're doing it, and you either fit in or you're gone. I would think that certainly this year, if not before, but certainly this year has been an opportunity for people to kind of go, wow,
to rethink
things.
Do
things differently.
Right.
It doesn't have to be horrible. I mean, the outstanding situation is not what we would all hope for, but
Yeah.
like, wow,
Yeah.
look at what we have done, and we all are working from home, and
Mhm.
regardless of what FCC or whatever governing body says, no, you can't do that, because in fact, it can happen.
Right.
And
In fact, you
like,
can do it. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. For my industry, which is, fly around the world and provide technical support, high travel to after a year of not traveling, like we're really having like, do we need
Oh,
to
wow, the
travel
world
anymore?
didn't stop.
Did they ever need
We
us
think
to
that,
begin
yeah,
with?
yeah.
So there's
Shocker.
a lot of that going on right now as stuff opens back up. Oh, the humanitarians, Rosaline, they're like chomping at the bit to already. They're like,
I know, I can imagine. Well,
yeah.
they've got Palestine,
Oh, I just had 2 colleagues come back from Tigray.
really. Yeah, yeah.
I don't think anybody's flying into Palestine.
No. Well, except the ones that are there already must be looking for support, I'm sure. Save the Children's in Gaza, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're in Gaza. Of course, maybe not of course, but of donor countries, the US doesn't have much programming in Gaza. So it's other, it's
Yeah.
mostly European Save the Children's that are supporting that program. But we do have quite a few staff of Palestinian heritage one thing I've been trying to manage this week and feeling kind of out of my depth are the 2 Palestinian colleagues who are saying basically, this is our George Floyd moment. We want to have these all staff conversations about, what's happening
Yeah.
to our people.
Yeah.
We want Save the Children to take, if you're
stand.
anti-racist, we want
Yeah.
you to take a stand on this. And of course, Save the Children is like, we protect children everywhere. And we have been putting out, whatever we put out about war not being good for children, and that people are like, that's not enough. And because I'm kind of a first line of managers who will be like actually answer an email and engage in those conversations. I was the first line, but then I was like quickly like, oh my God, I don't know how to manage a conversation on Palestine
Yeah.
among our staff.
Well, it could get difficult.
Oh,
It shouldn't, but it will.
well, yeah. I mean, I don't know, but I'm sure we have pro-Israel staff among us, so it would just get so quickly. Oh, American Jews, come on. And I think even if they're not super pro-Israel, they are.
I wish there was a way of, I don't know, it used to be like this, but I wish there, I mean, obviously the British left have been in huge trouble about this for 3 or 4 years anyway, but there used to be a way of being anti-Israel without being an anti-Semite. And I think in the UK, there's been huge, huge trouble over the last few years because Jeremy Corbyn was so far to the left, and he was a traditional, as many are in the left in the UK, pro-Palestinian. But the left never had a problem with it before. Even like 10 years ago, with the last really bad Gaza onslaught more than 10 years ago, in 2009, the left were not accused of being anti-Semitic. And maybe the growth of social media and just the involvement of the far left. And as we all know, there's an awful lot that unites the far left and the far right.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, these, I don't even know if they are a few bad apples or if they're a lot, but it makes it really hard to debate then, because people who genuinely do not see themselves as in any way being anti-Jewish, who really feel passionately about what Israel is doing, and what Israel is doing is wrong, just get gaslighted or get cancelled or get shut down or get or accused of being anti-Semitic. And it's just so polarizing here in the UK. It has been for so long, for the last 3 years. And of course, Jeremy Corbyn's never been good at communicating his feelings. And yet the previous head of Labour, Gordon Brown, never had a problem. He was like, some of the strongest and the best MPs and the best members of the British Labour Party are British Jews, and they have never had any problem as individuals coming out and saying what Israel is doing is wrong.
Right.
So we need to be able, be careful with our language as always, and be careful with everything that we say, but we need to be able to stand on a platform and be brave and know our facts, and to call out abuses, and to call out human rights abuses, and to call out military action that's inappropriate when we see it. But it's something's changed.
I don't know that I see it so much in our narrative as of people being called anti-Semitic.
It's very big here.
Yeah.
Hugely.
And certainly like our progressive leaders have been, outspoken on Palestine the last couple of days. But when you're an international NGO that relies on philanthropy and individual donors taking a stand on this issue,
you remember, I don't know if you remember the big DEC appeal in 2009 for Gaza. It was the worst DEC appeal ever, because all of the international NGOs and charities, when there's a big emergency around the world, they decide not to compete with each other, but they do, but they don't. They all come under one umbrella called the Disasters Emergency Committee. They raise money collectively, and then it's dished out according to your size. But it only works if all the broadcasters in the UK agree to it, and the majority of the big 10 charities in the DEC.
Right.
And all the charities agreed that this was a humanitarian crisis. And 2 days after the appeal was announced, the BBC pulled out, which was the first time in its 50-year history. And it was
because they were getting so much feedback from callers and stuff. Yeah.
The conspiracy theory was that the Jewish element of the BBC, which is always a conspiracy theory.
Oh, right. Yeah.
The BBC is run by British Jews. That, and I think, a substantial number of kind of British Jewish lobbies did say, this is, you've made a political decision by announcing this as a humanitarian crisis. And so many of the charities were saying, we're really not, this is not. Right. We've all, there have been many political situations and wars in the past. I mean, the very first one was Biafra, where, it was political to call it out as a humanitarian nightmare crisis, but it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was awful, because I'd gone for the interview as the head of media for the DEC about a month before. Thankfully, I didn't get it. The only time I've ever been glad not to get a job. Then Gaza was announced, and I was thinking, thank fuck. that would have set me to my grave with stress.
I don't remember that. I guess you were back in the UK.
Yeah,
because I wasn't with Save the Children, so I wouldn't have been paying attention to the deck.
Oh God, it was a nightmare. Yeah.
Hmm.
So, it's just horrible. Anyway.
Yeah, and I feel for our colleagues. I mean, they're, if you are of Palestinian descent, you are like triggered and horrified and all of. I mean, you're just as a human being, you are, but.
But why wouldn't you lead an internal a staff discussion on that?
Well, I'm actually saying I will help facilitate. I will help create space for that, but I need the people who are affected to be the ones, basically organizing, helping us understand what they want. And I think that they're also concerned that that there will be hostile elements. So they're I don't know, it's kind of floating around in this weird space right now where nobody wants to be the one to lead it or to.
But the problem is that it's the inequality. Like, Save the Children only works in, well, that's not true. It did do Hurricane Katrina, obviously, in the States, but it tends to work in countries where either a natural disaster or an emergency is happening, but it's a developing country, right? Obviously.
No, but we have
Katrina
huge domestic programs too.
yeah, you do now. But I mean,
Yeah.
the thing is, if an emergency, if an earthquake or something went off in Israel, Save the Children probably wouldn't go in because Israel probably has the capacity to deal with it themselves.
Right.
But obviously, right next door in Palestine or in Gaza, wherever, it's a country or a state on its knees. And so it would be in, obviously not for profits would argue we need to go in because the need is there.
Mm-hmm.
And that may be seen then as, oh, you're politically taking sides because you wouldn't come in if it was in Israel. But the reason you wouldn't go in Israel is because it's a Western country effectively, and it has all the capacity. It can deal with
Yeah.
most.
I mean, I think it's more than that. I mean, we do call Palestine occupied territory, right?
yeah,
So we
yeah.
do use that language as Save the Children.
Yeah.
So we do have somewhat of a stance of,
Exactly.
Israel is basically colonizing and taking away these people's land by force and so on. But yeah, I mean, Astrid, I'm troubled myself by why it's so hard and why I'm feeling so out of my element. It very quickly gets into a political discussion in a way. I think that some of the discussion around when people bring kind of racism issues into the office, it's not immediately like an argument over, abolition or an argument over police violence. It's more like personal, I guess, or like bringing your identity into the office. Whereas I think the Palestine issue immediately gets very geopolitical. And I know that we have people on all sides of the issue in our workplace. And we have Israelis in our workplace as well. So I guess you could say, well, we have white supremacists in our organization too.
Well, I mean,
in a different way though.
But so, I don't know. I'm doing a lot of social justice interpreting these days. And
so what's your take, Mary?
Well, as an interpreter, I have to be neutral. I'm passing the information back and forth, but what shouldn't be, I guess, but what is astounding to me is the perspective of how people of color have a certain perspective of non-people of color, white, whatever. And I mean, we did yesterday had I think it was like the third or fourth part of the Courageous Conversations with this all in a not school board, but teachers, and I think mostly teachers. And one of the small group, just breakout groups, we had a football coach, and I shouldn't be surprised ever, but it was astounding to me that this guy would say, "Oh no, I'm not racist." Well, anybody who's going to say that, you start there, right? And if you're not able to admit that we are all racist, kind of where do you go? And whether it's personal or not, and it is personal for every single person. It's not their problem. It's not it's everybody's problem, and it's our problem as white people to figure it out. It's not,
it's so interesting to think that you're signing some of these terms, Mary, because they've evolved so much. I mean, even like our comfort with saying white supremacy has evolved so much in the last 12, 24 months, but I'm imagining like how you sign about those issues must be evolving as well. Or I wonder if people like call you out and say like, oh, you shouldn't sign it that way, but
Yeah,
you know, like, do you put black with a capital B or not? You know, those types of things.
Well, and I, yesterday, even the interpreter I was teaming with, I said, you know, let's do a little debriefing afterwards, which doesn't always happen, you know, because Zoom goes off and you're done.
Mm.
And I had noticed that one of the signs she used, and we don't often do this, but there are times when it's appropriate to use a certain sign.
Mhm.
And what was curious to me was when she was referring to the question being posed to people of color, the same question being posed to white people, the signs were really different.
Hmm.
Exact same verbiage used by the presenter. And the sign was really, really different. And even, I don't even know if I can explain it well enough, but I noticed it. And normally I don't watch the other interpreter except to
Right.
be a team and offer support where I can. But it was so offensive to me.
Oh, really? What did you say?
Well, I'm trying to think of what it was. There was a continuum of where do you think you are on the continuum of being racist. I can't remember what the question was. I should, but the marks for white people were way on the other end, and all the people of color said, "Yeah, no, you're all zeros." And I mean, not surprising that the question was so very different, but the way this other interpreter presented that was not, the question was, okay, this is the question posed to people of color. So white people, just hang on a little bit. So the sign for wait is fine. Just wait. This isn't for you to answer. When the same question was posed to people of color, it was like disregard. So in and of the signs being used.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you think that was implicit bias, Mary, or?
Oh, I think, knowing this interpreter, I think it was, she just didn't think. I did point it out to her.
I mean, I think not thinking is maybe part of implicit bias, right? Like you're not really thinking, so you just.
Absolutely. And particularly when you are interpreting for something as didactic and conceptual as racism, and you're interpreting the race. I mean, it's fascinating to me that even, not that we are excused from any of that, but how we present it. And I noticed that as the football player coach or the football coach was talking about certain things, he talked about culture. The word culture is a C around a finger. The new sign for culture is inclusive. When he said something about culture, I signed white culture, just clearly very little meaning, very.
You knew what he meant by the word culture.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of our job is to.
I know, that's amazing, Mary, that too, though, because you have to, you've got to read the person as well as their language. You've got to interpret. You're not just interpret what they're saying. You're interpreting what they're
communicating.
Their intent and their
in a word culture, which in itself is a very innocuous word, right? It can mean 100 things.
Right.
Wow.
But you know, as the hairs on the back of my neck are going up, and I'm just thinking, oh wow. And just, I mean, I try to be aware of what I'm doing and how I'm signing it, and more than just
messenger.
Right. but I'm fascinated by that whole thing, and I'm curious to see if I haven't seen any trainings on that yet. It's kind of how to interpret social.
Oh, that's interesting. You haven't
Yeah.
seen any trainings on it.
Maybe
I
you
would think
could-
that there would
Maybe
be.
you could start it. Maybe you could start something like that. You could start at least a conversation about
Yeah.
that, right?
I think it definitely needs to happen, but yeah.
Mm.
Whew.
How are you, Astrid? Give us a quick update
Exhausted.
before we go in. Yeah.
Exhausted.
Yeah, you look tired.
The cavalry arrived. My cousin Diddy came up from Bavaria, and we
Mhm.
schlepped. I can't even. I'm still in shock. Like found fucking newspaper.
You're in the attic, yeah.
in
You're-
the attic today.
Did you find any cool stuff in the attic though? Did you
Not
find-
yet. No, because we just focused on
Getting the trash out.
the newsprint from the 1990s. Like, who in their right mind moves
Yeah.
with newsprint?
Yeah, but maybe a library. Do you think somebody will want it?
Newsprint?
No, maybe schools. I don't know.
I mean, from the 1990s, it must all be on microfiche or however it's stored these days. I don't know.
Well, I think the Bosnia-Serbian conflict was going strong.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God. Yeah, so yes, it was a ton of work. And
Those
and
are
we
heavy too. Yeah. I mean, that's
barely made a dent. And then we continue early in the morning. So,
wow.
in my day,
Wow.
and thank God he was there, because we had a lot of fun sitting in line trying to get into the recycling center, because of course, this being Germany, everybody does that on a long weekend. So,
Oh, what's the holiday there?
Ascension, the feast
Oh,
of Ascension.
that's right. Yeah,
yesterday.
all my
So
Euro-
everybody,
my Swedish
Oh.
colleagues and everybody's on holiday today. I forgot about that.
It's so
Yeah.
weird. Like we don't do that. We don't get that off in Ireland. You'd think, but
you'd
Mm.
think, but no, it's
Yeah.
like all the Protestants that are just
yeah, funny that one.
joined up.
Isn't it?
Oh, it's bizarre. Yeah,
I'm gonna look that up. Why is that? Ascension
why is
Thursday.
that?
I mean, we went to mass, but it wasn't a holy day. I mean, it wasn't a bank holiday. It was a holy day, but it wasn't a bank holiday.
Yeah, it's a total. Yeah,
Hmm. Yeah, it's funny
So
because it's the Eid holiday as well. So like
It's
a lot
Eid
of our
today, yeah.
offices are closed for
Yeah.
Eid these past couple days. But
Well,
then it was like, why are the Swedes off? They're not off for Eid. And it was like,
no,
I think
it's
they
just-
said, oh, it's some old Christian holiday. Like they didn't even say it was Ascension. Anyway.
Yeah, it's
Hmm.
bizarre. It's an odd one, and Cologne is a majority minority town. So if anybody should be taking Eid off, it's Cologne. It's going strong in the Muslim population, but it's it's really funny. It's like, no, Ascension, really? We're celebrating.
Have
that's a
you
holiday?
seen signs of Eid around town? Like, do you see mosques and people doing stuff, or
You know, I've been so
just focused on your own things? Yeah.
in my mom's little part of town. I did notice there were some folks taking elderly like some elders around,
Mhm.
probably to and from mosque. So I
Yeah,
did notice
or
some
to visit
riding-
family and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So I saw some high gloss Mercedeses driving around and dropping off clearly elderly people who'd come back
Yeah.
from mosque
Yeah.
or some celebration. Yeah.
I saw a big gaggle of Muslims in their finest yesterday when I was out for my walk, and it was nice to see, kind of, oh, there they are, all whatever they were doing, but
So I-
dressed up and
So fun fact that I learned yesterday from a Muslim colleague is that I guess there are different schools of thought as to whether you whether you recognize the end of Ramadan by the time in blank high holy place in Saudi Arabia. Help me out. Mecca. Thank you.
Mecca. Yeah.
Jesus, I'm just not like totally fading. Or in your local time zone,
Right.
and there are very different schools of thought.
Yes. I mean, Indonesia has those two schools of thought, and every year. It's a big discussion coming down to the days before Ramadan, who's going to go on what day. And invariably they go on different days. One goes first and the next goes second. And so if you have family members that are of one, following one leadership or the other, it like gets very chaotic. Most families, I think, are of one or the other, but it
Yeah.
makes it hard for offices, because if one of them goes a day early, you're like, oh, then you have
Yeah.
to close the office. You remember that, Rosaline?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also the Bangladeshis, they didn't really realize until I saw Naomi, our friend Naomi on Twitter going, for God's sake, why can't people agree? Like it's
But this
Bangladeshi-
day, pretty much the whole world delayed it. It was supposed to be on Wednesday, was what the lunar or the official calendar said. And I think the Saudis called it and said, no, it's going to be on Thursday. And as
except
far
for
as
the
I know,
Bangladeshis, they said except for Bangladesh, they always make Bangladesh wait a day longer.
oh, so Bangladesh waited even another day?
Yeah.
Yeah, because Indonesia, we were thinking it was Wednesday, and then it wasn't until Thursday.
Yeah.
So
'cause
I
it was-
didn't get the memo. So of course I
Yeah.
put out my thing of
yeah.
Hardy Raya, and everybody's like, balloon me balloon.
Tomorrow.
Yeah,
It was every year. Like it was a nightmare because at least for Christmas, when it's going to be, right? But it's like you were always like, when are we going on holidays? Which day are we closing? What day can we get off?
Well, and then it moves back 3 weeks every year. So that's the
Yeah.
other. Anyway. Okay, well, let's let our Astrid get
Yeah.
some rest. Thank you.